Begin today in Daf Mem Ches, right at the beginning of the Yamud, the Mishnah. Zok the Heilige Mishnah, Shalosh Asher saying there are three categories of trees that are served as Avoda Zara. This is similar to what it said in the previous Mishnah here regarding a house served as Avoda Zara, regarding rocks that are taken from a mountain served as Avoda Zara. So it's the same, the Mishnah says regarding the Asher tree. So there's a Ilon Shenatay Mitchila L'Shem Avodas Kechavim. There's a tree that was planted for the purpose of serving it for Avoda Zara. Areizu Asura. This is a tree that's Asur, and it's Avoda Zara that only a guy could be mevatel it, and if it belongs to a yid, you cannot be mevatel this. Now, if it's a tree that was not planted for Avoda Zara, but then Gidoi Upisloi L'Shem Avodas Kechavim, the yid comes and he's cutting off branches, and he's cutting branches that are dead, and therefore the reason he's doing this is because he wants more to grow better, and that will be Avoda Zara L'Shem Avodas Kechavim. And vehechlif, and that's what happened. The tree sort of changed in its growth, and it added more branches. So now neitel mashahechlif. Only those additional branches that grew is Avoda Zara. So he has to cut that off and burn it, like the halacha of the Asher is vasherei and tisser from be'esh, as it says in the pasuk. And then the rest of the tree that's there from before, it will be mutter bahana. So you don't have to be mevatel Avoda Zara the way it is when something is a real Avoda Zara already. It's enough just to cut off that part, and the rest will be mutter, and that's even if it belongs to a yid can do this as well. The third category is hemit tachteo avodas kechavim. If a person placed under this Asher tree temporarily Avoda Zara to be there, and then v'notla, but he removed it, areizum v'teres. It'll be mutter. Because it was only placed under the tree temporarily, that's the pshat that Rashi explains before regarding the Sinyan, because it was there only temporarily, so as soon as you remove it, it'll be mutter. Dr. Gemara Amri Debei Rabbi Yanai, it was said by Rabbi Yanai regarding this halacha of the Asher tree, that v'hu shehivrich v'hirkiv begufei shel ilan, that when you have a tree that was planted, and then later it grows more, and what grows more is being used to be worshipped as Avoda Zara, when will what's added be Asur for Avoda Zara? Only if Hivrich v'Hirkiv. If he grafted, what's the difference between Hivrich and Hirkiv in English? You have it there.
Layered and grafted.
Again, what's the word?
Layered.
Layered. So Hivrich is when you take the branch of a tree and you pull it down into the earth, and you put it into the earth, and it sort of grows like a new tree in the inside the earth. Hirkiv is when you graft. You take a branch from another tree and put it into this tree, and it grows a new quality of a branch from the other branch. So only if that was done, so then it's like there's a new tree growing here, and it'll become Asur. But if you just began serving this Avoda Zara without doing this on this tree, it's not going to Asur the tree itself. So the Gemara asks, but v'ha'anan, what did it say in the Mishnah? Gidoi upisloi tnan. The Mishnah says that even something much less than that, you don't have to graft or layer it, that it begins like a new tree mamish. Even just cutting off bad branches, which helps the quality of the growth, and new branches grow, then those new branches will become Asur. So therefore the Gemara says, Ella, so because of this, we must say that ki itmid Rabbi Yanai, when Rabbi Yanai says that v'hu shehivrich v'hirkiv, what was he saying this for? Le'inyan bitul itmar. What he was saying is regarding nullifying the name of the Avoda Zara on this tree. And what he was saying was that the afa gav the hivrich v'hirkiv begufei shel ilan, that a tree that was growing from before, and it was not Avoda Zara, and then the person layered it or grafted it, and now it grew more fresh branches in a different way. So he did something which changed the mamish in the nature of the tree itself, much more than just pruning it and cutting off bad branches, that it adds more. So kinata mashehichle shaper dami. Says Rabbi Yanai, nevertheless, if you just remove what was added, the new branches that were added after he grafted it, it'll be enough. And what's the chiddush here? The Ma'ad would think to say, even the hivrich v'hirkiv, once you graft it to this extent, it's begufei shel ilan. It's something that's you're changing mamish in the nature of the tree itself. Ki ilan shenatay mitchila dami. It should be considered like a fresh tree that you're planting from, like a seed that you plant in the ground, and then the whole tree is Asur. And velitza kula, and once the whole tree becomes Asur, so now it's much harder to be mevatel it. Only a guy can be mevatel this Avoda Zara, a yid cannot be mevatel Avoda Zara. Kamash malan. Therefore, by Rabbi Yanai, they taught to say that even after it was grafted, you could still be mevatel Avoda Zara. Even a yid could be mevatel it by just cutting off the new branches that grew. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, Shmuel said, Hamishtachave le'ilon, Fasei Asura, a person that bows down to a tree. So what we're talking about over here is a tree that was not planted l'shem Avoda Zara, but now there's additional branches that grew, and he bows down to the tree as it's growing now. So only those additional branches that grew now will be aser. But the tree, the way it was from before, is not going to be aser. Maas of Rabbi Lazar, this sugya that we're learning here is actually a continuation, and it sort of completes the Gemara before on Daf Mem Hey, which discusses this halacha. There was a machlekes the Gemara brought before between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda regarding a tree that was planted l'chatchila not l'shem Avoda Zara, and then there's additional parts of the tree that continues growing, and the person serves it then as Avoda Zara. What happens now? Okay, so this our sugya is a continuation of that machlekes. Let's see, the Gemara will explain. Okay, so now the Gemara starts and asks, Masav Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar asks, and what Shmuel said, again from the same case in our Mishnah. The Mishnah said regarding a tree that was not planted for Avoda Zara, that Gidai upisloi Avodas Kechavim, if he cut and he pruned the tree for the purpose that it should grow more and better for Avoda Zara, vehichlif, and it grew, it changed, and new fresh branches came. So he has to remove those new branches that grew. That's the halach of the Mishnah. So what do we see from this? Gidai upisloi in. It sounds like in the Mishnah the person has to do some action, something in order for those fresh branches to grow that it would become aser, and he has to cut it off. But loi gidloi upisloi. But if he did not do anything, he did not cut it, prune it in order for these new branches to grow, loi. So then it's not going to be aser. Because it's a tree that's connected to the ground, so then we're going to say that it's similar to what it says regarding a rock or a hill that's connected to the ground that does not become asa b'hana. So regarding this tree that was not planted l'shem Avoda Zara, even if branches grow later and the person is serving it Avoda Zara later, it's not going to be asa b'hana. So that's what it's mashma from our Mishnah. The only reason why it is asa b'hana because there's a maisa, there's a tfisas yad adam. There's something that the person did. He pruned the tree for the fresh branches to grow. But without that, just bowing down to the tree, the new branches that are growing are not going to become asa. So how does Shmuel say that without any action, just bowing down to the tree, it becomes asa? Amalach Shmuel, so Shmuel will answer you, it's a machlekes. As I mentioned, Gemara before on Daf Mem Hey brought this machlekes. Hamani Rabbanani. The Mishnah here follows the opinion of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan were the ones that said that an shaded tree could be similar to a rock or a mountain or hill that's connected to the ground and will not become asa b'hana even if you serve it later. Now Shmuel, the Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. Shmuel though follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. The Amar, his opinion is that Elon Shenata, a tree that was planted not for Avoda Zara, but a l'b'seif avodah, but then he served it as an Avoda Zara, asa. Then afterwards, the new branches that grow will become asa. So therefore, it's two different opinions. Okay, so now, what's the understanding of the Gemara at this point? That everybody will agree that this tree that was not planted l'shem Avoda Zara, the ikar of the tree that was there from before is not going to be asa. The only machlokes is regarding the added branches that grow later. According to the Rabbanan, even the added branches that grow later will also be mutter if you serve it as an Avoda Zara if the person didn't do a maisa, like it said in the Mishnah that he pruned it. Mashenk Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda says that the added branches will become aser if the person worships it for Avoda Zara. Okay, but now here the Gemara though will question the point that the Gemara is going to explain here is maybe we should say that the machlokes of the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda is beneged to the ikar of the tree that was planted already from before. Maybe the added branches, everybody agrees once you worship the Avoda Zara, those added branches become asa. Maybe the machlokes has been neged to the ikar of the tree itself. Says the Gemara, Maskav Lo Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi here asked the Shaila for Rav Yosef. Mimai, how do you know that the explanation that we just said for this machlokes is true? Mimai de Rav Yosef bar Yehuda veRabbanan b'Tosefes pligi. How do we know that they're only arguing with the added branches here? Dilme Tosefes al divrei hakol aser. Maybe when it comes to the added branches, if one bows to this tree, it will become aser. And if that's the case, we could say that Shmuel follows all opinions. Ubeikrai pligi, the machlokes of the Rabbanan, Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda that we brought from Daf Mem Hey, they're arguing regarding the ikr of the tree that was there from before, that was planted from before, not l'shem Avoda Zara. Now, what would be the explanation for their machlokes? Why would Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda say that even that part of the tree should be aser? And I'll explain as follows. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's opinion is ikroi nami aser, that even the ikr of the tree that's there from before will also become aser once you worship this tree later. And the source is the chsiv, because the pasuk says va'ashereyem tisrafum be'esh. The asherah tree should be burnt in fire. So Rashi says that the Gemara means to say, it says ashereyem loshen rabim, and it's saying loshen rabim to say that not only the added branches are aser, but even the ikr will also be aser. That's the source of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. But Rabbanan's opinion is ikr ilon shari, that in such a case, since the tree lachatchila was not planted for Avoda Zara, the ikr of the tree is mutter. And only the branches later that you're worshiping then are aser. And his source is because the chsiv, the pasuk says, "Va'ashereyem tegadeyun," that by an asherah tree tegadeyun means you have to cut off. What does cut off mean? Ezeu ilon shegiduay aser. What's a tree that only the branches that you're cutting off are forbidden, but the ikre shari, the ikr, the root of the tree or the trunk of the tree that was there from before is allowed. This is a tree that was planted not for Avoda Zara, and later he worshipped it. This is the tree that's going to be, only the branches are going to be aser. Maybe this is how we have to learn the drasha. And according to the Rabbanan, we don't learn out from Vashereyem, Tisrum Be'esh, Loshen Rabim. Ashereyem means just the many branches of the tree. So therefore, the machlokes here between Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the Rabbanan is, are we learning from Vashereyem, Tisrum Be'esh, or no, are we learning from Vashereyem to Gadeyun? Maybe that's the explanation of the machlokes. So it comes out that everybody agrees that the additional branches would be aser. Now, if you'll argue and say, and here the Gemara follows up from the way it explained the machlokes before on Daf Mem Hey, that over there, over there, that's not how this machlokes was explained. On Daf Mem Hey, the Gemara there actually said that everybody agrees that the ikr of the tree is mutter. If it was not planted l'shem Avoda Zara, that part is mutter. Only the added branches is where the machlokes is. And according to the Rabbanan, even the added branches are mutter, and the reason is because Rabbanan say we compare a tree to rocks and hills that never become aser. Mashenkin and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says that the added branches become aser, and actually the Gemara there said that the drasha of these two psukim that the Gemara just quoted is the exact opposite. That Rabbanan say that I learned from Vashereyem Tisrafum Be'esh, that only when a tree is lachatchila planted l'shem Avoda Zara, then you have to burn the entire tree. But if it wasn't planted l'chatchila l'shem Avoda Zara, it'll always be mutter. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is the one that learned out from the second pasuk, Vashereyem tegadeyun, that the added branches you have to cut them off. The exact opposite of what the Gemara says here. So the Gemara says, Eipuch Rabbanan l'Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, l'Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda l'Rabbanan. So we could still switch their opinions. Why is the Gemara saying this? Because from the Gemara before in Daf Mem Hey, you see that the opinions of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and Rabbanan are not spelled out clearly. It's not 100% clear in the Braise there that it quotes the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda and the drasha that he says. It doesn't say clearly how you have to darshan. Actually, if you look there in the Gemara in Daf Mem Hey, it's mashma like the Gemara says here, that Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is the one that darshans the pasuk Vashereyem Tisrafum Be'esh. So therefore the Gemara says, true, on Daf Mem Hey, the conclusion of the Gemara was that everybody holds that the ikr will be mutter, and they're only arguing about the branches, but we could switch it, and we could say that maybe it's the opposite. And everybody agrees that the branches will be aser, and they're only arguing about the ikr. And the machlokes is the way the Gemara is explaining here. It's the Rabbanon that learn out from Vashereyem to Kadeyun, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda learns out from Vashereyem to Tisrafum Be'esh. So we can say, if that's the case, what's Rav Ashi gaining with this? What Shmuel said will be l'kula alma. Shmuel says you bow down to a tree, the additional branches become aser, it'll be l'kula alma. But now the Gemara asks, if that's the case, so imken gido yipisloi man katani. Now going back to the Mishnah. In the Mishnah it says that if you just bow down to the tree, it's not going to become aser, even the added branches. Only if the person did an action, he pruned the tree, then will it become aser. Who's the Tana of our Mishnah? According to what Rav Ashi is suggesting now, it's not going to be either of these opinions, and the Gemara explains, because if it would be the Rabbanon, the Rabbanon say, even without any action, as soon as you bow down to a tree, the added branches become aser. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Iker Ilan Nami Yosef. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says a tree that wasn't planted for Avoda Zara, but as soon as you serve it as an Avoda Zara, the entire tree, even the Iker, becomes Asa. So who's the Tana of our Mishnah that says that only with the action of pruning it after you planted it, and then will the added branches become Asa? So the Gemara says, according to this pshat, you could actually explain how the Mishnah would work according to both opinions. I can explain how the Mishnah works according to both opinions. I can explain how our Mishnah works according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda that says that once you serve a tree, the entire tree becomes aser. Yeah, if you serve a tree that wasn't planted for Avoda Zara, but once you serve it as Avoda Zara, it becomes totally aser, but that's when you did not do an action. You did not prune the tree. So then, Iker Ilan aser, the Iker of the Ilan will also become aser, bistama. That's without doing any action by the person buying down to it, it will become aser. But if the person is pruning the tree, why is he pruning the tree? Because he's revealing that he's not interested in worshipping the entire tree as an Avoda Zara. It's only those additional branches that by pruning it, it's going to grow fresh branches. He wants to worship only that as an Avoda Zara. He doesn't want the whole tree to become an Avoda Zara. So Adarabah, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, it comes out when you prune the tree, that creates a kula. That shows that he's not interested in worshipping the entire tree. That's why our Mishnah says, in this case, that only the added branches will become aser. That's according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Now, or I could say that our Mishnah follows the Rabbanah's opinion, and even though the Rabbanah hold that the added branches would be aser even without doing an action, even without pruning the tree. But Gidai upisloi itzrichalei. The Mishnah here has to mention this case where the person pruned the tree because there's a chiddush in this. So I would think to say, Kivin the Avadle Maisa begufei, that once a person does this activity in the tree itself to prune it, I would think that maybe here the Rabbana would agree to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda that Iker Ilan Nami Litzah. That maybe the Issa now should affect the Iker of the tree as well. He's doing something in the tree itself, so the whole tree should become Asr. Kamash Malan, therefore the Mishnah says that according to the Rabbanan, even when he did an action in the tree itself, only those new fresh branches that grow are Asr, and it's enough to cut off those branches to get rid of the Avoda Zara. Zakteilige Mishnah, Ezu Asheira. What is the Asheira tree? Kol sheyesh tachtav v'edes kechavim. Asheira tree is not only when you're worshipping the tree itself, but even if you place under this tree an Avoda Zara, that is an Asheira tree. The tree here is serving the Avoda Zara. It's for the sake of this Avoda Zara under the tree. This is also an Asheira tree. Rab Shimon says, Kol she'ovdin oisa, only if they're worshipping the tree itself. If you place an Avoda Zara under the tree, so then that's not an Asheira tree. The tree itself is the tree itself will still be mutter. There was a story in Sidon. They saw that they were worshipping, they were bowing to this tree, and they weren't sure if it's the tree itself or not. Under the tree, they found this pile of rocks. Check what's inside it. And they inspected it. They found inside it a image or a shape or something that was made for Avoda Zara. So he said to them, they're not worshipping the tree itself, they're worshipping the tzura that's under the tree, not the lenasila. So we can be matir the tree itself, it's not an Asheira tree. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on this. Here in the Mishnah it's saying it's a machlokes regarding the tree that something was placed under it. Ezo Asheira, here this Mishnah is saying, what is the Asheira tree? It's asking this Shaila, what is this Asheira tree? But the question is, Vohanan Shalish Asheris Tanan. In the previous Mishnah, it said, it sounded like the Mishnah is saying, everybody agrees that there's three different categories of the Asheira tree. So the Gemara explains, this is how you have to understand the previous Mishnah together with this Mishnah. That Shtayim, there are two of these trees that are Divrei HaKol. Everybody agrees that you're worshipping the tree itself, or the fresh branches that grow on it after you prune it, that's something everyone agrees to. But va'achas, the last case that was mentioned in the previous Mishnah, when someone places something under the tree, machlokes the Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan. This will be a machlokes Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan, whether when you place that object under this tree permanently, in the previous Mishnah, according to Rashi, he placed it there just temporarily, but if you place it there permanently, it's a machlokes Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan, ezi asheira shenachleku ba. What is an Asheda where there's this machlokes? The Rab Shimon v'Chachamim kol sheyesh tachtel avodas kechavim. If there's under this tree this Avoda Zara, Rab Shimon and the kol she'avdu ma'isa. Rab Shimon says only if they worship the tree itself, then it's going to be an Asheda tree. Okay, so the last case, the third case is taka a machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan, and this second Mishnah is coming to spell out that machlokes. Okay, now the Gemara says Ezoi Asheda stam. Now, an Asheda tree that you're worshiping the tree itself. What is an Asheda tree? How do we know that people are worshiping this tree? You just see a nice tree. So what makes it into an Asheda tree? Amar Rav says it has to be in a case that kol shekaimrim yoshvim tachtel. You see that there are priests sitting under this tree. Ve'ein toimim mipedisah. And they don't eat from its fruits, that's a sign that they're definitely worshiping this tree. Shmuel Lama Shmuel says, Afila Omri, Hani, even if you see that they say, Hani Tamri Lebe Nitzrafi, Asr, that these dates of the tree, we're going to take it from Nitzrafi, which is an Avoda Zara, and therefore it's Asr for us to eat from it. The Rami Be Shichra, they take this fruits and they make beer out of it, Vishasi Lebe Yoimedam, and they drink from it on the day of their holiday of Avoda Zara. So even though it's that they're using these fruits, they're using it to eat or to drink from it on the day of their Avoda Zara, that also means that it's an Avoda Zara tree. Amar Ameima said, Amar Li Sabi de Pompadisa, the elders of Pompadisa told me, Hilchase Kishmul. The halacha is like Shmuel regarding identifying an Asheda tree. One may not sit in the shadow of the Asheda tree. The shadow of the branches of the Asheda tree, if you have a gnaw from it, so you're not allowed to have a gnaw from the Avoda Zara, so you may not sit in the shadow of this tree. So here Tosfos, the Rishonim all discussed that there's a similar concept. The Gemara brings some psachim regarding not having a gnaw from Hektish, and there it clearly says that if you're in a place where the shadow of the Beis HaMikdash, and you're going into the shadow of the Beis HaMikdash and having a gnaw from that shade, then there's no issue. There's no meila. So why is Avoda Zara different? So Tosfos says that over here, this tree that is made for that shade. The Heichal, the Beis HaMikdash, was not built for the purpose of the shade that it creates outside of it. But the Asheda tree that they worshipped as an Avoda Zara was also made l'chatchila for this purpose, that you get the shade of this Avoda Zara. That's why it's going to be Asar.
When the shade, that's when it's the Avoda Zara.
Yeah, correct. Or another pshat Tosfos says is that it's a special chumrah of Avoda Zara, which sounds like Tosfos is saying that it's taka only Asr midrabanan. Okay, now v'im yashav, if he sits in the shade of the Asheda tree, tahir, he's going to be tahir. Now Avoda Zara causes tumah, and takrevis Avoda Zara, when you have things that were sacrificed for Avoda Zara, could cause tumah even just by an oil being under the same tent as it. But over here, though, he's not sitting under the branch of the tree. It's the shade of the tree where you have the sun that creates a shade further away, but not under the branch of the tree, so it'll be tahir. Should not walk below the tree. If he walks below the tree, he becomes tame because he's below the tree. The Gemara will explain. Now, if the area that the tree is going over is a street where everyone walks there, and he walks below the tree, tahir, here he will be tahir. According to Rashi, Rashi says that it's tumah midrabanan. Many Rishonim also said that this whole entire tumah that there is by Avoda Zara is all just midrabanan. Even though the Gemara brings psukim for this, but it's an asmachta, and therefore Chachamu will not geyser this tumah in a place where it's going to take away from people that are walking under it. Okay, so the Gemara said in the Mishnah, one should not sit in the shade of the Avoda Zara tree, the Ashera, Pshite, it's obvious. He's not allowed to have a gnaw from Avoda Zara. We're talking about over here about the shade of this tree that's very weak shade. Because as she says, early in the morning or late in the afternoon, when the light of the sun is coming from an angle, and therefore the shade of the tree goes very far. And when that shade of the tree is further away from the tree, it's not a very strong shade. It's a weaker shade. So here the chiddush is even that little level of hana, that's not mamish the full hana, the real hana of the shade of the tree, it's still going to be yasa. Says the Gemara, okay, if that's the pshat in the Mishnah, b'chlal the betzel koimasa, that if it's the actual shade, the regular shade of the actual height of the tree, not when it goes to a distance, when the sun is at an angle, im yashav tameh, in that case, if he would sit under this shade, even if he's not directly under the branch of the tree, he would become tameh. That's what it sounds like. Says the Gemara, loy. That's not how you have to be medayik from the Mishnah. Even if he sits under the shade of the tree, which is the shade like what the height of the tree is, he'll still be tired, as long as he's not under the actual branches of the tree. The Mishnah is just coming to say a chiddush. Even that weak shade that goes in a distance from the tree when the sun is on an angle, you shouldn't sit under it as well. Some said this statement of Rabbi Yochanan regarding the seif of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Vim yashav tahir." If he sits under the shade of the tree, he'll still be tahir. So the question on this was pshita. It's obvious that he's tahir. He never sat under the branch of the tree. Why would you think that sitting in the shade of the tree would make you tummy? We're talking about the shade of the actual height of the tree, not the shade that's further away from the tree. So over here, the Mishnah is coming to say that you would think that because you're very close to the tree, under the shade of the actual height of the tree, you would be tameh, and it's coming to say that you're not. Says the Gemara, based on this pshat, miklal the letzel tzila. Should I be medayik here? The Mishnah is saying that you shouldn't sit under the shade of the height of the tree. Does that mean that the tzel tzila, the further shade, when the sun is on an angle, over there you're even allowed to sit there? So on this, the Gemara says, no, loy, it's not. You can't be medayik that. Hakamashmalan is just coming to say this chiddush. When you sit under that shade of the tree that's mamish like the height of the tree, you'll still be tired. Then the Mishnah said, "V'lo yaver tachtav v'im over tameh." Should not walk under the tree, and if you do, you become tameh. Says the Gemara, my time. What's the reason why the person becomes tameh? So here the Gemara will explain. Okay, first let's see the answer. Answers the Gemara because efsher the leket hakrevis Avodas Kechavim. It's impossible that you don't have under this Asheda tree things that were sacrificed for the Avoda Zara, and therefore, if you sit under the tree together with that takrevis Avoda Zara, you're like under a tent. You're under the same place with this takrevis Avoda Zara. There's a tumah of oil, and you become aser. Now, this is a unique chiddush that applies only to takrevis Avoda Zara. We had it earlier in the Masechta. Avoda Zara is metama a person, but only if you touch it or carry it. But when you get to takrayvis Avoda Zara, there's an additional chumrah that even tumas oil, which is by a mace, applies as well. And therefore over here, we say that definitely there's takrayvis Avoda Zara and you'll be aser. Says the Gemara, Mani, who is the source of this halacha? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiri. The Tanya, we learned in the Brayse, as we had before the Masechta, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiri, Oimer, Minayin le'takrayvis Avoda Zecham shemitama ba'oil. How do I know if things that are sacrificed for Avoda Zara causes tumah even by being under the same tent as it? Shenem, the pasuk says, Vayitzamdu leBaal Pa'ir. They desired Baal Pa'ir, Vayichlu zivchei mesim, and they ate from zivchei mesim. So we're talking about things that are sacrificed of Avoda Zara, and it's called mason. Ma mace metama ba'oil, just like about mace, you become tami ba'oil. After krevis of Avodas Kechavim, metama ba'oil. Takrevis of Avodas Kechavim also is metama, a person ba'oil. So here, this is the source for takrevis of Avoda Zara. For Avoda Zara itself, the Gemara before brought in the Mishnah the source of Rabbi Akiva, and the Tan of the Mishnah, it says shakis teshaktzenu. Or there's another pasuk on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. It brought the pasuk of a nida, tizrem k'maydava, that Avoda Zara is compared to a nida. The Rebbe speaks about this Indian of Tumas Avoda Zara. It was mentioned before, yeah. The Rebbe in a Sikh in Chelik Lamed and Parshas Vayishlach brings that the Rambam brings this halacha of Tumas Avoda Zara, and he doesn't quote any of the psukim that the Gemara quotes. Instead, he quotes the pasuk that it says in Parshas Vayishlach when Yaakov told the Shvatim after they came back from war that they should get rid of everything. Hasiru alekei nechar. Get rid of the Avoda Zara that you have amongst you. So the Rebbe asks, why doesn't he quote the psukim that it says in the Gemara? And the Rebbe explains that from the lashon of these psukim, it would be mashma that there's an actual isser in the cheftza of the Avoda Zara itself. The tumah is caused like any tumah that there is in the cheftza itself, like a sheretz or tmei meis. The Rama wants you to understand that the tumah of Avoda Zara is different than regular tumah. It's a tumah with the rabbanan that chachamim will geyser on the person, on the gavra, that he should act in this, behave like with this tumah, the contact or oil of Avoda Zara. But it's not really a tumah in the cheftza itself. And then in the Sikha, the Rebbe explains Ba'arichas that Avoda Zara is different than any other tumah, because the whole existence of Avoda Zara is b'chlal not a real thing. It's just the attitude of people that they're serving this as Avoda Zara. Every other tumah, the Torah says a sheretz is also the tmei meis, the meis is tamei. That's tumah in the cheftza. Avoda Zara is a dimyan ba'alma. It's not a real existence b'chlal, and the whole tumah is midrabanan on the gavra. That's the Rebbe defines the scene. The Rebbe explains the scene in Ba'arichas. Okay, talk to Gemara weiter. It said in the Mishnah. If you have this tree a shada and the branches are going over a street and everyone walks there, so even if you walk under it, it'll be tight. In Bayalo, the Shaila was asked, Ovar or Oiver. Do you read this Mishnah? Does it mean that b'diavad, if you walked under it, it'll be allowed, you won't be tamei? Or lechatchila, in a street where the shade tree is hanging, you're allowed to walk under it. He said that you're allowed to go there. If you went under it, you won't become tamei. It's only b'diavad. Oh, but the Gemara says, they're not arguing. If there's another way you can go, so then you shouldn't walk here. Now, when it says here, the Mefarshim say that means that there's another path you can go, which is the same length, the same as this path. I'm not talking about another path, which will be a detour, which will be longer. Same as this path, so you can go another way, so you shouldn't go here. And if there's no other way to go, so then l'chatchila you can walk there. Amalei Rav Sheshes l'shamei. The Gemara brings Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was blind and he was walking with his servant. He said to his servant, "Kimatis lahasam, when you come to this place where there's Avoda Zara, arhitni. So have me go with me quickly. We'll run across it under this ashera tree." So the Gemara asks, "Hey Chidami, what was the case of Rav Sheshes walking here? Either like a derech acherin, if there was no other way to go, lamalei arhitne. So then why is it necessary to run? Mishra Shari, as we just said, in such a case, it's a chatchila mutter to walk there. And if there's another way to go, ki ama arhitni mishari. There's another way to go, so he should be walking another pathway, not this way. Answers the Gemara, it must be that there was no other way to go. So even though it's the chatchila mutter to walk there, but nevertheless, v'adam choshuv shani. A person that's on this stature, that people learn from what he does, and they see him walking under this, is different. He should be careful, even in such a case, so he cannot walk another way, but when he goes through, he should run quickly.
The only problem going under is only if there's the kravis of Avoda Zara?
Yeah.
If there's no...
If you're having hanor from the shade of it, then even without, that's a issue of tumah. But if you're having hanor from the shade when you're walking under it, then even without the crevice of Avoda Zara, it could be a problem. There's also the minig. I think the makar of this minig is a hanhaga from the Friediger Rebbe that if there's a church and there's an overhang, you should walk around and not walk under it. It's not mamish the same thing as the Gemara is speaking about over here. A nov of Avoda Zara itself. It's over here we're talking mamish about an ashera itself. That this is mamish of Avoda Zara, but this is I think a minute. I think it's from the Friediger Rebbe that he walked around. Yeah. Or a movie theater as well. The overhang. Yeah. Yeah. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Zayrin Tachteha. Regarding an ashera tree, you're allowed to plant vegetables under it. Yirakis, that is, vegetables. B'maisa geshamim. That's in the winter when you don't need the shade. You're not using the benefit, the hana of the shade for these vegetables that are growing there. Avaloi b'maisa chama, but not in the summer when you need the shade for these vegetables to grow. V'chazirin it is, sorry. And v'chazirin, this is some kind of vegetables, I believe. Am I right? Huh? Lettuce? Okay, yeah. Chazeres. Yeah. So v'chazirin loy b'maisa chama v'loy b'maisa kshomi. The lettuce you can't plant under the ashera tree, not in the summer and not in the winter, because this lettuce does need the shade both from the tree, both in the summer and in the winter. Rabbi Yossi argues and says, "Af le'yirakis b'maisa geshamim." You can't plant these vegetables under the ashera tree even in the winter. Why? Because there's there's leaves from this tree that falls onto the vegetables that are growing there. And what happens with these leaves? They go into the ground. It actually is a benefit. It's like a fertilizer for what grows. And then it comes out that your vegetables that are growing is growing from the soil, but it's also growing, it's getting a kayach from the leaves of the Avoda Zara. Now, so what's the Gemara now explains? How do we understand this machlokes regarding the winter when the leaves fall down? Says the Gemara, Lemeimer, shall we say that Rabbi Yossi savar? The explanation for Rabbi Yossi's opinion is Zeh v'zeh geirim aser. When you have two different things that are the cause for the growth of these vegetables, it'll be aser. It's a concept we had before a few times. That over here you have the soil that's causing its growth, plus the fertilizer of these leaves that are now adding to its growth. So therefore, it's going to be aser. But the Rabbanan say, when you have two things that are causing its growth, it's going to be mutter. It's also growing from the soil. So the fact that it's also the leaves are adding to its growth doesn't matter. In fact, the Gemara, if that's the explanation for the machlokes in our Mishnah, but ha'ipcha shamina lahu, we had in the Mishnah before here in the Masechta, we see regarding the same concept of zev v'zeh gaidim, and the opinions there are switched around. Because the Tanan, the Mishnah before said, how do you get rid of an Avoda Zara? The Gemara, the Mishnah, they spoke about being mevatel an Avoda Zara. Rabbi Yossi says, what you could do is, sheichik v'zayra l'ruach, you can pulverize the Avoda Zara and then you throw it into the wind. Or you throw it into the water. Amar Eloi, the Chachamim say to him, that's not enough. Because what happens if you just throw it into the wind? Afi nasa zevel. What's going to happen is it's going to land onto the person's property and it becomes fertilizer. So it's growing also from the Avoda Zara. And Venema, the pasuk says, "Yidbak b'yadcha me'uma min ha'cherem." Shouldn't have any connection, any anah from Avoda Zara, even this, that it can become fertilizer in the field. So therefore, what do Chachamim say? What do you have to do with Avoda Zara? You have to throw it into the Yam HaMelach, as we had before. Says the Gemara, Kashye, the Rabbanan, the Rabbanan. So we have a contradiction. Here the Rabbanan is saying, by the leaves that are falling from the Ashera tree, there's no issue. And before, when you're pulverizing it and it lands on the field, it is a problem. So over there, the Rabbanan says Zev v'zeh gaidim is a problem. And Kashi the Rabbi Yossi, and there's also a contradiction in Rabbi Yossi's opinion as well. So here the Rishonim point out there's an interesting thing. The Gemara here was thinking to say that the Rabbanan say in our Mishnah, Zev v'zeh gaidim is not a problem. Therefore, when the leaves fall down, it's not going to be a problem. But the shaila is, what's with the reish of the Mishnah? When you're planting, or even according to the Chachamim, in the reish of the Mishnah, you're planting under this Ashera tree, and what do the Chachamim say? If it's in the summer, it's a problem because the shade of the tree is benefiting these vegetables. But isn't that Zev v'zeh gaidim? It's growing from the soil, and it's also using the benefit of the Ashera trees. And over there, Chachamim are saying that it's Aser. What was the halamin of the Gemara here to say that the explanation for what the Rabbanan are saying in the Seif is that Zev v'zeh gaidim is mutter? So the Rishonim say an interesting answer that in the Reish of the Mishnah, it's not the same concept of Zev v'zeh gaidim, because over there, the shade that the Ashera tree provides is not what the soil provides. It provides two different things. It grows from the soil, and then the shade is shade. Two separate things, even though they both are needed for the growth of it, but it's two different things. Here in the Seif of the Mishnah, we're talking about the leaves that fall into the soil. It becomes part of the fertilizer of the soil. That's what's called Zev v'zeh gaidim. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Bishleim the Rabbi Yossi like Kashya. The contradiction of Rabbi Yossi's opinion, we could simply answer. Why? Because Hasam, the Ka'azal le'ibud. What is it talking about over there? That the person pulverized Avoda Zara and he's throwing it into the wind. So matter. So over there he says that it will be allowed. Once he's being ma'abed Avoda Zara, so it's destroyed, it's gone. So over there, Rabbi Yossi is not concerned about the Zev v'zeh gaidim. But over here, though, we're not talking about Avoda Zara that it's being destroyed. Over here, we're talking about the Ashera tree that's growing. And in its natural state of growth, there's leaves that fall down from it. That's not Mavatal Avoda Zara at all. So therefore, Aser. Here, Rabbi Yossi says that the Zev v'zeh gaidim will be a problem. But Ela the Rabbanan Kashye, but the contradiction in Rabbanan's opinion remains a contradiction. Says the Gemara Epoch, because it is contradiction, you have to switch the opinions in our Mishnah. Or the Gemara says you could say loy tepech. You don't have to switch the opinions. The Rabbi Yossi Kiddushanen, the answer for Rabbi Yossi, the contradiction of Rabbi Yossi's opinion, as we just answered, and the Rabbanon, for Rabbanon I can answer as follows: Kid Omar of Mori. Berei the Rav Kahana. Rav Mari said in the name of Rav Kahana, the Gemara here doesn't bring the story of what he was speaking about. Rashi brings what he was speaking about is animal from Kachim. An animal from Kachim that becomes puzzle, what do you do with it? It has to be redeemed from Hektish. But even after you redeem it from Hektish and it's sold in the market, it still has a certain status of Hektish. You can't treat it with Bizayin. So therefore, when you skin it, you're taking off the hide from the animal. So there's two ways how to skin an animal. You can either cut it into pieces and then take off the skin, or there's a way how you can, from the feet, pull off the entire skin in one piece. Thing is, when you do that, it's much more expensive. Now you have the whole hide of the animal. It can be used to make bigger barrels out of it or different things out of it, but it comes with much more of the flesh of the animal when you do that. So it says that when by the psuli hamukdashin, when you're going to skin it, you shouldn't take off the whole hide together, because that's going to be a bezayim, because it brings off a lot of the basar of the animal comes off with it, and it's a bezayim for the basar of the kachim to come off with the hide of the animal. Okay, but what's Rav Mari Bar Kahana coming to address on this subject? The question is, but when you skin the animal in this way, it's actually much more expensive. You have the full height of the animal. You could sell it for much more if you're allowed to do that. If the person buying it knows he's not allowed to do that, Hektish will lose money because it's not as valuable if you cut up the skin when you have to remove it. So the Mari Bar Kahana explains, whatever gain you'll have by the fact that you're going to remove the skin all in one piece, paigim b'basar, you end up anyways losing by this, that it takes off from the meat of the animal, and therefore anyways you're not going to gain anything from this. So how does this apply to our case? So over here the Gemara says the same thing. In our case, whatever you're gaining by these leaves that fall into the vegetables that are growing, and it adds to the fertilizer and it grows better, paigim b'tzel. But the fact that it also creates shade, the shade also takes away a little bit from its growth because it also needs sun for its growth. So the shade actually also takes away from the quality of its growth. And so this Avoda Zara is actually doing two things. It decreases the value of what's growing because of the shade that takes away from its value, but then it also adds fertilizer that adds to its value. So it equals out. In the end of the day, whatever is growing here, you don't have an added value to it from Avoda Zara. It says, there has to be something that there's a hana that you're getting from Avoda Zara. But over here, it equals out by the fact that there's a fertilizer, but it also, the shade takes away a little bit from its growth. So therefore, over here, zev will not be a problem according to the Rabbanan.